What makes developers productive? Last time we already talked about productivity and the relation to developer satisfaction at their daily work. And while research has found this correlation, it's interesting to see that there are actually research papers on the topic on which factors tend to increase and decrease developer satisfaction. And of course, that's interesting to know if you're an IT person like me, or even if you have a company, or maybe you're involved in HR in a company which has IT people, and basically depends on their performance. Then, of course, it helps to know which factors increase and decrease their daily work happiness because it's strongly correlated to their productivity. So, let's start with some positive factors that I have found in those papers. Of course, I will give you a link in the description if you want to look into the details. Today, I want to give you just the gist of my personal findings from this. So, number one of the positive factors is that the developer has enough uninterrupted time to get focused work done. So you may already know this from your daily work. There are days where you can focus a lot and really get things done, and there are days where there's a lot of distraction. Maybe there's a lot of production incidents that, of course, weren't planned for, but that you need to look into. Maybe there's a lot ad hoc calls, meetings, stuff like that. Or other things like infrastructure issues where you're not really getting your planned work for the day done, but you're basically distracted by unplanned events. And when you have a lot of focus time where you don't need to care about those unplanned events, that is a good thing for developer satisfaction. Point number two is having a balance between your sole development work and collaboration. Now, when you look into the internet, you usually get the idea that developers are those programmer guys who are just sitting at the keyboard all day long for themselves, not interacting with other people, but just with their computers. Of course, everybody who has some experience in the industry knows that is not true. You have to do some collaborative work too. You have to talk to stakeholders, maybe customers, users, product owners, whatever, to clarify requirements. You also have your colleagues, which you need to collaborate with. Maybe you're doing a bit of pair programming. Maybe you're doing a code review. Maybe you have a new colleague on the team who needs to be onboarded, and you show this person the code base and your workflow. So it's key to have a good balance between this development focus time on your own and effective collaboration. That is the second positive factor. Number three is agency over one's own workday structure and environment. What is meant by that? It means to have power over your workday and the environment that you're in. So let me give you a few examples. When you're flexible about your working hours to some degree, this really helps in this agency over your own workday. Maybe you can work from home if you want to. And of course, you should have a quiet environment to actually be able to focus. All these things, when you have them in your control, when you can decide where do I want to work, in which environment, at which hours, that really helps to boost your satisfaction as a developer and probably also your productivity. Then number four is about the goal of your work, and that is to work on something that you consider valuable or that you can actually to some degree identify with. Maybe you know that from private projects or open source projects that you've chosen. There it's usually easy to motivate yourself because it's actually something that you see as valuable. When you're looking for maybe jobs or projects, you might also be looking for business goals that are actually interesting for you, that you consider valuable. If it's not the case, it might be that you're not really motivated to work on these things, and you will probably also have a harder time to understand what you're actually doing and why you're doing it. So finding meaning and identification in the goal of this software product is pretty useful too for being satisfied at work. Okay, now the other side, negative factors. And just by knowing those negative factors and basically avoiding them most of the time, you can already improve your day-to-day satisfaction as an IT person. Number one is, of course, unplanned distractions. So we already touched on that when there are critical ad hoc bugs, meetings which are unplanned, infrastructure issues. Maybe you have a background noise because there's construction work in front of your office. That is a negative factor for sure. Then there's number two, fragmented work days. So it means when you have to do a lot of context switching, when you have to jump even between planned appointments. Let's say you jump between implementing a new feature, then a scheduled meeting, then you need to take care of a coworker and do some knowledge sharing. Those things are not bad per se, but when you do a lot of those things in short time intervals, let's say every 15 minutes, half an hour, the whole day, it's likely you're going to have a lot of mental load and effort just for context switching. And that usually impacts satisfaction and productivity. Then number three, there is strong time pressure, which is not unusual. It can be caused by many things. Maybe there's an overly tight deadline. Maybe we managed our own time in a bad way. Maybe there's some misunderstandings between management and the developers. And that usually leads to things like working overtime, increased stress levels, arguments, or a bad mood in the team. So, of course, that's a negative factor. And last but not least, working frequently on mundane or repetitive tasks is not good. So maybe you know that when you're doing things manually over and over again, let's say there's a deployment process or build process that is not automated and you're doing it manually every week or every day. Maybe you have manual tests that you need to repeat over and over again because you have not invested in automated testing as much. When there's a small bug fix from a colleague and you need to start all over again and do all the manual testing again, which takes hours, and it's always the same steps, and it's not really stimulating for your brain, and so it's a negative factor. Okay, those were my 4 positive and negative findings distilled for you. And when we put that into a single sentence, here's what companies should actually know to keep their engineers happy. That is, developers usually want to spend their time efficiently and build something of value. Those 2 things. Building something that is considered valuable and do it in an efficient way. So without many distractions and with a work process that is pretty straightforward and efficient. So that was it for today. What's your experience with developer productivity? How do you know you had a good day at work? Feel free to tell me in the comments.